Hello and welcome to the GMI, that's the Guitar Music Institute podcast, episode number 53. My name is Jed Brockie and today I'll be talking to James Akers. Jamie, as he's known to his friends, has been on the show before. I felt it would be a great idea to get him back because he's bringing out an album of beautiful songs played on fingerstyle acoustic guitar, all based around Scotland. And in addition to that, he's also bringing out a book about these very songs, which will help people play from all levels and abilities. So I thought it'd be a great chance to catch up with Jamie and find out what he's been doing. He's got a lot of great stories to tell, a whole lot of great music, so I hope you enjoy the episode that's coming up. Well, Jamie, after an intro like that, the crowds listening on around the world can't see you beaming, but I can see you are. It's great to have you back on the podcast. How are you doing, my old mucker?
Thank you very much, Jed. It is a great pleasure to be here. I'm doing very well, actually.
Oh, that's good. Now, the last time you were on was back in 2019, and you're part of a small band of people we've had back. But there's a couple of reasons I wanted to have you back. One is because you're such a prolific author and involved with GMI, and it just seemed right. Because you've also got a new album out, and I thought it was a great opportunity to really tell people around the world about this album. So what's the name of the album?
So the album is called I Once Loved a Lass.
Is that a quote from anywhere or just from your own personal life?
Well, combination of the two. It's a traditional Scottish folk song, and it's one that was recommended to me. So the album itself is links to some of the work I've done with GMI, because it's the first time I've done an album. Usually I play classical stuff, which is obviously written by other composers. But in this case, it's my own arrangements and my own compositions. So in a way, it's a complete vanity project, churning something like this out. But at the same time, it has given me a great deal of pleasure to just explore different aspects of being a musician and being a guitarist that I don't normally do professionally in this way, which obviously I've done arrangements and published books, but I've never actually done a recording of my own music.
Well, you call it a vanity project, Jamie, but I'm sure thousands of people around the world are going to love what you're going to release. And with regards to that, why don't you choose and tell us? We're going to play small snippets from the album as this interview carries on. So what is the first song that we're going to hear a short passage from?
Right, well, I'd like to start at the beginning of the album with a track I just call the introduction, because this is my own composition, and it came about because, actually, and this does relate back to GMI again, because I wrote a couple of studies in my GMI graded exam workbook, which were in a kind of Celtic guitar style, and they turned out quite well. And then when I was working on this album, I wanted something, just some prelude almost at the beginning to introduce, because the rest of it's arrangements of traditional tunes, but this introduction is actually my own composition, but I wanted to put a slightly different slant on the kind of Celtic guitar sound world. So it's actually, I wrote a piece in 5/8, which doesn't occur very often in traditional Scottish music, but hopefully it still has the kind of the features of the kind of Celtic guitar sound, but it just so happens it's in a wacky time signature.
Okay, well, let's just listen to that now. Well, that sounds amazing. Now, 5/8. That's quite a playful, they always say it's a playful time signature to use. Is that why you decided to write in 5/8, or is it just the idea came to you in 5/8?
It's a combination. I mean, yeah, you're right. It's quite playful. I like the slightly unpredictable feel that it gives, because I want it, because it's still very flowing, I think, when you hear it, but it's just slightly unusual, that sense of, okay, because it's the way I've interpreted the 5/8 is it's like a triplet and then a duplet, right? So you get that kind of rhythm, which both rhythms feature quite
prominently in kind of reels and jigs and all the kind of traditional music. But usually you'll get like a whole stream of triplets or a whole stream of eighth notes, quavers. Whereas here, that kind of, the combination of the two, I think, just makes it a little bit different. Absolutely. Now, did this piece that you've written, how much is that influenced by the pieces you then went on to play by other composers? Yeah, I mean, it's definitely in keeping with the melodic ideas and the traditional harmonies of this kind of traditional Celtic guitar sort of school. When I say Celtic guitar school, I'm thinking of, fairly recent things, like Tony McManus and Stephen Wade, these kind of guys who've been exploring that, taking what were fiddle tunes or bagpipe tunes and playing them on the guitar, often using kind of alternate tunings and that kind of thing, which I didn't do so much myself. But so it's taking that as my starting point, but then trying to put a little different twists on it, because either rhythmically, like in that first piece in the 5/8, or extending the harmonic range. So trying to respect the tradition, but also bring elements from outside of it. So kind of not exactly jazz harmonies in a sort of traditional functional sense, but the kind of major seventh chords, ninth chords, sus chords, the kind of sounds that you perhaps don't normally associate with this traditional music, but I think give it a new life in a way, because the tunes are very nice, but the advantage of playing on the guitar is you can add something harmonically to it. It's great that you're talking about and respecting and bringing melody to the fore, Jamie, because it seems to me there's a real movement right now to just soundscapes. We don't do many, or I don't do many, let's be honest, podcasts these days, but I do get a lot of submissions, and quite a lot comes through from guitar players, and I have to say that a lot of them, when I listen to the music, there's no real melodic content. It's merely a soundscape. Do you have any feelings and thoughts on that vis-a-vis the music that you're bringing out? Yes, I think what I find it's very ambient. I know what you mean exactly. Because I did quite a lot of research, being a classical player, I did my research before approaching this project, and so I watched a lot of acoustic guitarists online and listened to a lot of what's going on is very ambient. It's very, in a way, it struck me that referencing melody and harmony in the way that a lot of what was going on was the creating resonance rather than creating harmony. So they're using open tunings, and when you've got an open tuning, it kind of creates lots of overtones and harmonics, so it gives you the illusion of harmony. And I think it's the same, you play a kind of noodle around in a kind of mode, and it gives you the illusion of melody, but you don't have the actual idea of a structured, because when you think about any famous tune, it's a structured thing, and in a way the foundation of musical form is repetition. So if you don't engage with repetition, if you just kind of noodle around over a drone with an open tuning in a mode, it sounds nice enough, but it doesn't have a kind of understanding of form, and it has the illusion of harmony, and it has a kind of, as you say, this kind of non-melody. So melody has to have form, has to have kind of, so that it goes from A to B and then repeats, and then that very traditional, very standard kind of structures, but they're that way because they work. Well, certainly on a lot of the material that I hear being recorded these days, and it's beautifully recorded, within a slice of it, it is a rich sonic soundscape, but people won't be going down the street whistling these tunes anytime soon, and I think that's important. So before I turn into a complete crusty old man moaning about this, that and the next thing, what is the next song that we're going to hear a short extract from, and why did you pick this song, and is there any specific things you'd like to tell us about the recording or the history of the song, or just to enrich it for us?
Sure. I'd like to pick the track 3 on the album, which is an arrangement of another famous sort of Robert Burns song. Now, the thing to remember about Robert Burns is he wrote the words, but not the tunes. So a lot of songs are referred to as Burns songs, but actually he took an pre-existent tune and wrote words to it. So
right.
You can't really call him a composer, but he's often credited with this song. So this one is called Caw the Yows. Good old Scots title, basically yows or sheep, right? Now, this is a beautiful melody, really beautiful, and it was very used quite a lot. I mean, for example, the English composer Vaughan Williams actually did an arrangement of this song for choir. So it's one that, it's a very moving tune. Now, my take on it was, I wanted to there's a reference in one of the verses of the poem to a stream, like the water flowing in the stream. So I kind of wanted to sustain this very beautiful melody, but underneath have this kind of continuous flowing arpeggiation to kind of represent the stream. And so that's kind of what I did. And then, but also, as I was saying, to kind of use it as a springboard to explore different sonorities and harmonies that I could achieve underpinning. So hopefully you get the traditional tune, but you hear it in a way that allows the melody to be supported by something that kind of hopefully evokes something of the text.
Almost a kind of pedal.
It's sort of, I mean, it's, I think you call it
ostinato, would it be an ostinato?
It's not repetitive. It's kind of a perpetuam mobile. It's got this kind of continuously moving, and I tried to get it so that it doesn't, it's never exactly the same. There's a repetition, or the harmonies stay the same, but the chords are slightly altered. So like in the way that, if you sit by a stream, it's never the same water, even though it's always flowing. So I tried to keep it so it's never the same. But
let's have a listen to that now. That sounded absolutely wonderful, Jamie, and perhaps well done on that. A really lovely work there. And it might be a good time just to tell people a little about your background, because although you now live in England, in London, the heart of the music business in Europe in many ways, or in all ways, you actually come from Scotland, and you come from southern Scotland. You were talking about Robert Burns. Do you think that has had any impact on how you view music and the guitar, stringed instruments?
As an exile, I think, like exiles usually are, I think I'm become more aware and attached to Scotland and where I grew up and the musical life of Scotland since being away. I think when I was there and growing up, it wasn't like anywhere. I mean, folk music's not something you hear unless you go out your way to hear it, So when I was a kid growing up, it was the music that you heard was kind of Guns N' Roses, and I think that's the first kind of music I engaged with kind of the rock music of the time. But then, going back from, or looking back from now, I think that I was exposed to kind of folk tunes and Robert Burns things at school, and although it wasn't something that I engaged with then, I'm glad now to have had that foundation.
It's really funny you talking about the music of an area. I remember walking through at the head of Loch Gilphead, the little village right on the loch, way up there in the Highlands, and walking through the village and I was hearing some American rap, and I was just, this is about 15 years ago, I was just so outraged by it because it just seemed so wrong, as if, you know, everybody up there is going to be playing Celtic Highland Scottish music. It just doesn't work like that. So it's quite funny, isn't it, that these music, the music that is associated with specific areas, is hardly listened to within those areas.
It's just the tourists who want to hear it, you know. You go somewhere and it's like, let's hear some Scottish music, and everyone in Scotland is kind of listening to whatever's on in the charts or on the radio.
So maybe we'll take a slight detour from a completely selfish publishing perspective. We can talk about the fact that the song that we've just heard, you have actually written a book which will be released by GMI later this year. Tell us a little about that, and it's got that song in it, hasn't it?
It does, yeah. Well, actually, the whole genesis of this project was doing the book. So I've done several books of arrangements for GMI now, and which I sort of got really into during lockdown. You know, if one is kind of a bit creative and you can't do what you normally do, you find some kind of outlet. So I found a bit of an outlet in doing arrangements. And so that's kind of what happened. And then, so I had the idea to do the Scottish book, a book of arrangements of Scottish tunes. So that's what started me down this path, really. So I was, you know, and then I thought, okay, I wanted to do it in a kind of consistent kind of Celtic guitar style, which I'd heard and listened to, a style of music I'd heard and listened to, but which I find isn't very well documented. You know, there's a few books here and there, but, you know, it's not something...
I find that surprising, Jamie.
Yeah, I mean, I looked around. There's a few books of transcriptions and things, but I guess a lot of the players who do this, they play by ear. They're not kind of necessarily read music. You know, they're not in a position to notate it themselves, perhaps. So they're relying on transcribers, and you know, so it's. And
I should just point out that your book, you don't have to read music to be able to get the most out of it, do you?
No, well, it does have tab. I mean, I've got tab and standard notation. That's very true. I do make it accessible to all as best I can. But that was kind of genesis. And then while I was working on the arrangements, so the arrangements in the book are like I've worked on before. There's 3 versions of each tune. You've got this, you know, the basic tune with the chords. Then you've got an intermediate version, which is the tune with the bass. And then you've got an advanced version, which is a full-on kind
This is now the GMI system, because I used this in a book that I recently brought out about hymns, actually, called Songs of Worship. And I used that system that you introduced to GMI, which I think people really, really like, don't they?
In my experience, I mean, the comments and the reviews have been very positive, and the system, I sort of came up with it basically through teaching, because I was always looking for a book at Christmas time that had, you know, basically this, and I could never find it. I was always looking for a book that I could use with a broad range of students of different levels, and there was something for everyone. And this book didn't exist, so eventually I got frustrated and I wrote it myself.
Quite right, and you've written 2 Christmas books now, haven't you?
I have. Well, you know, there's so much Christmas love out there. I mean,
absolutely. Just tell us a little bit more about the songs that you've got in this new book that complements this album, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the album.
Sure. So in the book, I went for my initial plan was to just have the 12 most beautiful Scottish tunes I could find, you know. So it's really the greatest hits of the traditional Scottish repertoire, which I think is the best place to start, you know. You've got My Love Is Like a Red, Red Rose, and Ye Banks and Braes, Coming Through the Rye, all the, you know, the Hogmanay stuff that they used to show on TV every December. So it's got those, as I say, in the 3 different versions, and different from my other books, in the Christmas books, I explore a variety of different styles in the advanced version. So there's kind of jazzy arrangements or folky or classical arrangements of the different tunes. But in this, I try to be absolutely consistent stylistically. So everything's in a kind of Celtic guitar style, using the kind of harmonies that you'd expect to hear, slightly extended, as we said, and the textures that I kind of bring something to it, I think, slightly different. So it's hopefully familiar yet interesting enough for anyone, and then obviously simple or challenging enough for any to enable you, as you advance, learn to play the guitar, to really challenge yourself with the same, but still play the same favourite tunes.
Just to get people's appetite whetted about, if they're thinking about your book, perhaps you could suggest another track from your album.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. Shall we go for the famous "My Love Is Like a Red, Red Rose"?
Oh yes, that's one of my favourites. Yeah, that's
right.
Yeah. Let's listen to that now. Well, Jamie, I think that has to be one of the best renditions that I've heard of that song, albeit without the words. But I just think you can't beat an instrumental. Your phrasing and the way everything's brought through is wonderful. It truly is. Now, I just wanted to touch on another aspect of albums, and that was the artwork. Can you tell us about the artwork and what you've chosen, and if there's anything you'd like to tell us about that choice?
Well, yeah, now, this album, unusually for me, I self-released this one. So all my previous albums have been full-on classical guitar things, and they're released on kind of classical labels. Now, this one, because it's more of a personal project, I thought, I'll release it off my own back. The downside of that was that, of course, I had to do all the presentation myself. So I had to come up with a cover, and I just went back to my own my experience growing up. And near where I grew up in the town of Peebles, there's a local landmark called Needpeth Castle, which is not anything like Edinburgh Castle. It's nothing splendid. It's what they call a keep. So it's a very big, sturdy stone building, several stories high, very dark, dank, and uncomfortable inside.
Does it have a dungeon?
It does have a dungeon,
wow.
Yeah.
You know what I found out about dungeons? Found out that they were always usually placed under the kitchens. So if you were a prisoner in the dungeon, you could literally go insane smelling all the lovely grub that was being cooked above you.
They thought of everything.
They had a sense of humour back in the good old days. So do you know the family that owned that or ran that establishment?
No, not off the top of my head.
Not the Needpaths. Not
the Needpaths. I think there's a mixture of, because it dates back to the 13th century.
Wow.
So it goes back a long way. So there's been it's passed through a variety of hands over the years.
Now, was that not assaulted at one point by some English army?
Yeah, well, that's the castle's claim to fame, is that it sits on one side of a valley. So the River Tweed runs through the middle of the valley. On one side is Needpeth Castle, on the other side is a wood. And at a certain point during the English Civil War, which of course strayed into Scotland because a lot of the Scots were fighting on the wrong side of the English Civil War.
As usual.
As usual, they were backing King Charles, who was of course, Scottish himself. And so Oliver Cromwell's armies made it all the way up to Scotland, and they actually set their cannon on the opposite bank of the valley, and they fired a few cannon shots up, and the side of the castle facing the River Tweed still has the scars of these cannonballs that hit it.
Now that's interesting, because I have played many a gig at Borthwick Castle. Have you ever played there?
Haven't, no.
A lot of these castles, I don't know about Needpath Castle, but Borthwick Castle, famous because Mary Queen of Scots ran through the night with her. She didn't run; she was on horseback, which is all the more impressive. With her lover, who I think was Darnley, but don't quote me on that because I'm not a historian. From Edinburgh, and to find this castle is hard enough. They seem to build these castles in hard to find places, which kind of is weird when you're thinking about them as castles. You think they would say, we're the castle, don't mess with us. And she went all through the night. But that castle was also bombarded by Cromwell. But the weird thing about it is the castle is more like a keep, as you say, a straight up. It's right beside a hill.
Yeah.
So he just rolled the cannon to the hill, blasted it a few times, and as you were saying about Needpath, you can still see the marks. And they said, pull up the white flag.
Yeah, pretty much.
So you've used a picture of Needpath Castle on the artwork?
That's basically the cover of the artwork. Because now this one is released obviously on streaming platforms and digital. I haven't really gone for any hard copies of this, so you won't be able to buy a CD. But I'm not sure that many people buy CDs in this day and age.
Isn't it a shame, when we think back to our youth, where you would buy an album and the wonderful covers and everything, the artwork's almost superfluous now, isn't it?
It is. It's just a wee thumbnail, that you have, on Spotify or whatever. I know what you mean. I mean, that whole big LP thing, and it's all very ornate, and you got it home and you had to read I think that's what's really missing with streaming is, because for likes of me being a geek and everything, if I'm listening to a track, I want to know who played on it, and then you can't find
you
that.
Total geek.
I know, but it's like, who's playing on this? Or, if there's a...
You try to work out who to feel jealous about.
Well, you know what I mean? You just want the background of it. I want to be able to say, oh, I know him, or not, or...
Do you know... Yes. Do you know what I found quite interesting is that there's a lot of horrible things with the internet, but Wikipedia, if we can believe anything on it, is amazing for finding out who played on what. Yeah,
it's true, actually. There is that. There are resources that you can access, but yeah, for sure.
So I want to stray a little away from the album. We're going to hear one last track before we end up, but I wanted to also talk about the fact that we're all back playing, thank goodness, even although the world's still, I suppose, in the grip of a pandemic. We're pretending it's not there. You've been dressing up again, haven't you?
Oh yes. Well, in my day job, I've worked a lot in the opera business and the theatre business, darling. And, so yeah, I'm back doing an opera at Glyndebourne, the opera festival, and I'm back doing Don Pasquale of Donizetti, and for which there's an on-stage band of which I'm a member.
Can you tell us a little about all of that? It sounds very... I know nothing about it. I'm not going to pretend I do. I don't.
Yeah. About the opera itself?
Yes, about the opera itself. What's the basic storyline? It's surely not about a misogynistic play again, is it? They usually all are.
No, it's kind of it's an opera buffa. That means it's a comic opera. I say by Donizetti. So Don Pasquale is a rich elderly gentleman who is a bachelor. Then he has a doctor who decides that this rich elderly gentleman needs to be parted from his cash. So he inveigles a young lady that he knows to seduce and marry the old guy. Meanwhile,
this is what I'm talking about, Jamie.
But the young lady falls in love with the old guy's son, and then so it's meant to be a kind of...
Is it a farce?
It is very much so. The bad guy is really the doctor who's sort of pulling all the strings. The woman is she actually expresses remorse for what she's doing, but she's kind of egged on by the doctor guy. And the poor old guy, she ends up feeling kind of sorry for him.
So wait a minute, is that a spoiler alert?
I don't know. You can go and see it if you want. And then
well, it's a wee bit far away from me. But
all ends
in a mess.
In a mess, yeah.
Yeah, but the point is, you have to dress up, darling, don't you?
I do. I have to dress up I have wig and hair and makeup. So it's set in kind of 18th century kind of Georgian costume. So, Blackadder 3, basically.
So how long does it take to get all the gear on?
About half an hour.
And what with the powder and the face and all that? Do they have one of those sort of bags full of powder?
It's not that kind of, it's not the Rolling Stones, it's Glyndebourne Opera. No bags of powder here.
Indeed.
It's grease paint, you have to smear it all over your paint.
And do you have to put any lipstick on?
You put a little bit of rouge, yes.
Right, okay. So how many times do you have to do how long is the play going on for?
It's going on until the end of August, so it's 2 shows a week. So it's a good run.
Oh yeah, that's fantastic. Where can people see this if they're in Garland?
If they're in Garland, so it's Glyndebourne Opera Festival, basically. So it's this big stately home just near Brighton, and they've the Toffs who own it have built a big theatre in the grounds of their stately home, and then you go. They put on opera. They have an opera company. They put on these shows through the summer. So you go along. It's a slightly different setup. You go along. It starts early, about 4:30. You see the first act of the opera, and then there's an interval of an hour and a half, during which you go and have a picnic in the grounds of the stately home. So you go there, have your picnic, get tanked up on champagne.
I was going to say, does it end up where everyone's completely blutered?
Yeah, they seem a lot more lively in the second half, yeah. And then do the second act of the operas, and then they go home. So it's it's a bit of an event, really. If you go to it, it's not just like going to a gig or something. It's actually people dress up and they make a big deal of it.
So do you know the joke? How do you make a jazz musician unhappy? Give him a gig. What time do you have to start? When do you have to leave the house, and when do you get back? Aim.
Well, this is the easiest gig I've ever done because I have to play for 4 minutes, right?
4 minutes?
I know, it's literally one aria in this whole opera that I have to play in. So I need to leave the house to get there. It's just over an hour, but I like to leave 2 hours just because I'm neurotic. So usually I leave the house about just before 5 o'clock. So I usually get there about 6:25, and then play. I don't need to play until about 10 to 8.
And you're back home about 10:30.
Back home 10:30, between 10:30 and 11. Yeah.
Well, that's not bad. So, without going into close detail, as a musician, do you get paid for the entire 3-hour session or something like that?
Yeah, you get paid now because. It's an interesting setup because I'm on stage and in costume. You get paid extra for that.
Is that a doubling fee?
Yeah, like a doubling fee. So even though I'm only playing for 4 minutes, I actually get paid more than the poor song.
I thought you only got a doubling fee when you were in Ireland.
Well, maybe.
Oh, wait a minute. I might be getting confused with something else.
I think you're...
Do you know that in America, I heard this from a friend who is very much a Hollywood composer, and he said that the producer of Fame got someone to play some notes and, just... The session was over when they were doing Fame, and he got someone to play some... He said, hey, piano player, just play some notes and some scales and arpeggios. Yeah. And then another day he said, hey, harp player, whatever it was, please. And then he wrote down that all these were his original compositions, and he put them through. And what nobody knew was that in Fame there was all these little cuts to people playing in a corridor, like the piano player or something, and the guy put them down as his compositions and made a fortune. So There you go. Is it true? I don't know, but that's what I was told. So anyway, back to you. So you're getting a doubling fee for dressing up and prancing around.
Exactly, yeah.
And what about the music itself, Jamie? Is it difficult?
No.
It's not.
I do have to play it from memory. I mean, it's just basically kind of just strumming. I mean, not strumming exactly. It's quite a simple part, but it's accompanying a singer, right? So I'd say it's a simple part, but you have to be on the ball. The thing you might think. The idea is that classical music is all very fixed and rigid, and it just happens the same way every time, but not with opera singers, because when you think about it, they're not just singing, they're acting, they're flouncing about the stage. So there's quite a lot of leeway in what they do. So yeah, you really have to be able to react quick. It's not like you kind of just, you repeat it. It's not the same every night, So it's a simple part, but technically, but musically, you are accompanying.
Said like a true professional, talking up your part there. Excellent. So, Jamie, I find that all thoroughly interesting, and I hope the people out there do as well. I'm sure they will. But let's get back to the topic in hand, and it's the final extract from your album, which is titled...
So this is the last track on the album, and it's a setting of Wild Mountain Time, the famous, very beautiful, famous Scottish folk song.
And what time signature is this in?
4/4. It's pretty simple. But now, well, you'll hear it, how it goes. I put a slightly different take on this. Because of the way the tune goes, it's slightly syncopated. So in my arrangement, I kind of tried to max up the syncopation. And it started sounding a little bit kind of gospel with this kind of syncopated chord change. And then on top of that, now I'm not a big, I don't know about you, Jed, but you've seen these guys, kind of Andy McKee, and these guys who kind of do all the hitting the guitars.
I call it slap and tickle.
Slap and tickle, yeah. Now, that style, I find it interesting. Now, a bit like we were saying earlier, I've never been quite convinced by anything I've heard. But I thought it's like you could kind of take bits of it. So anyway, in this one, I do a little bit of kind of percussive stuff, on the offbeats, and kind of do a bit of slapping and tickling, as you say, on the strings, which I've never, it just for out of interest, really. I mean, I don't go so far as to do any kind of tapping or anything like that. I just kind of keep a pulse going.
I think the thing with the old tapping and using the guitar as a percussive, it always, to my mind, always ends up sounding like somewhere in the deep south of the United States, and railroad tracks and folks that are, shimmering heat and folk hanging about. So anyway, with that being said, let's listen finally to a short extract of Wild Mountain Time. Well, there we have it. That was a wonderful way to end this chat, I suppose, with me old mucker Jamie Akers, or James Akers, his stage name. What is the name of the album again?
So the album is called I Once Loved a Lass, and it's available on all kind of streaming platforms. As
well as being available on streaming platforms, can people actually buy and download it, Jamie?
Oh, I haven't set that up yet, no.
But, okay, so for now, but we should also say that if people enjoy the streaming aspect of it, they should look out. I think this book of yours will probably be out the end of September, and I think that would make a very nice Christmas present. So the only thing that remains to say, it's great to hook up with you again, Jamie, and hear all the things you're doing. It's tremendously exciting. And all the best with the album and, of course, the various books for GMI. But then I would say that, wouldn't I?
You would. Thank you very much, Jed, for having me, and all the best, everyone.
So thanks for listening to episode number 53. I hope to have another episode out within the next month or so. It's been a lot less than has been in previous years, but really just the force of work in terms of recording and bringing out new books and running GMI has taken up so much time that the podcasts are really kind of difficult to wedge in, but I do them when I can, and I really enjoy doing them, and I hope that it's wherever you are in the world you've found this episode interesting, and you hang in there and look out and subscribe and look out for the next episode when that happens. So once again, thanks for your time. See you on the next one.